I should have seen it coming. The signs were there. The rushed phone calls, the accidentally missed birthdays, the way his wife, Vanessa, would stiffen every time I hugged him. But nothing prepares you for the moment your own blood looks you in the eye and says, "He wasn't expecting me for Christmas this year." I felt the world tilt under my feet, but I kept my voice steady and hung up without argument. Little did I know that within days a force greater than any human plan would intervene, turning their holiday into a nightmare they never saw coming. God struck, and what followed was a chain of events so perfectly timed, so devastatingly just, that it still gives me chills to recount. But before I dive deeper, if you're hooked already, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about your own family holiday surprises. I'd love to hear them. Now let me take you back to how it all began. It was early December, and I'd been looking forward to Christmas like I always did. At 65, with my wife gone for nearly a decade, these holidays with my son Ethan and his family were my anchor. Ethan, my only child, lived about 3 hours away in a cozy suburb outside Seattle, with his wife Laura and their 2 kids, ages 7 and 9. I'd helped them buy that house years ago, dipping into my savings to cover the down payment when Ethan's job as a mid-level manager wasn't quite cutting it. Every year since, I'd drive up with gifts piled in the back of my old Ford pickup, ready to play Santa for the grandkids and share stories around the fire. But this year, something felt off from the start. The call came on a chilly evening as I was wrapping presents in my living room, the scent of pine from my small tree filling the air. Ethan's voice was clipped, almost rehearsed. "Dad, about Christmas, Laura and I have been talking, and we're keeping it small this year. Just us and her folks. We weren't really expecting you to come." I paused, the tape dispenser frozen in my hand. "What do you mean, not expecting me? We've done this every year since the kids were born." He sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Things change, Dad. Laura's parents are getting older, and they want quality time without too many people. Plus, the house is tight on space. You understand, right?" Understand? It felt like a punch to the gut. But I swallowed my hurt and said, "Sure, son. Merry Christmas anyway." After hanging up, I sat there staring at the half-wrapped toys, wondering where I'd gone wrong as a father. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, replaying every sacrifice I'd made for Ethan. Paying for his college when money was tight, bailing him out of debt after a bad investment, even sending monthly checks to help with the kids' school fees. And now I was sidelined for Laura's parents, who had always sensed looked down on me as the blue-collar widower from a small town. By morning, anger had given way to a deep sadness, and I did what I always did in tough times. I prayed. Kneeling by my bed, I asked God for strength, for understanding, and maybe, just maybe, for justice if I'd been wronged. I didn't know it then, but that prayer was about to unleash a storm. The next few days passed in a blur. I decided to spend Christmas alone, maybe volunteer at the local shelter to keep busy. But on December 20th, everything shifted. I got a frantic call from Ethan at 2 a.m. "Dad, something's wrong. The house, there's been a flood or something. Water everywhere." His voice cracked with panic. I bolted upright. "What happened? Are the kids okay?" "Yeah, they're fine, but the basement is ruined and it's spreading upstairs. The plumber says it's the pipes, burst from some freak cold snap we didn't see coming." A cold snap? Our region had been mild, but apparently a sudden drop in temperature overnight had hit their area hard, freezing pipes that Ethan admitted he'd neglected to insulate properly despite my warnings last winter. I offered to drive up right away, but Ethan hesitated. "No, Dad, we've got it. Insurance should cover it. Just pray for us, okay?" Pray? I'd already been doing that. As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. It was as if the first domino had fallen.
Little did I know, this was just the beginning of God's strike, a series of events that would expose cracks in their perfect life I'd never imagined.
The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Ethan, left just after sunrise. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept. "Dad, it's worse than we thought. The water damage is extensive. Floors, walls, even the kids' rooms. Insurance is only covering part of it because we didn't update our policy like we were supposed to. Laura's freaking out. I'll call later." I listened to it twice, my coffee growing cold on the kitchen counter. Part of me wanted to jump in my truck and fix everything, like I'd done so many times before. But something held me back, a quiet voice in my gut, or maybe something bigger, telling me to wait. This wasn't my mess to clean up anymore. By noon, Ethan called again, this time with Laura in the background, her voice sharp and accusing, though I couldn't make out the words. "Dad, we're in a bind," he said. "The repair estimate is $15,000, and we don't have that kind of cash right now. Can you maybe help out? Just this once." I leaned against the counter, staring at the fridge where a photo of Ethan and the kids at last year's Christmas was taped up, all smiles. "Ethan, you told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas because there wasn't room. But there's room for my wallet when you're in trouble?" Silence. Then a muffled argument on his end before he came back. "That's not fair, Dad. You know we love you. It's just complicated with Laura's parents." Complicated. That word again, like it excused everything. I took a deep breath, remembering my prayer for justice. "Ethan, I've been bailing you out for years. College, your car, the house, the kids' school. I'm 65, son. My savings aren't endless. You've got to figure this one out." He didn't argue, just let out a defeated sigh. "Okay, Dad, I get it." After we hung up, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly drowned out by something else. Resolve. For years, I'd been their safety net, but maybe it was time they learned to stand on their own. Or maybe, as I'd soon discover, something bigger was at work, exposing truths I'd been too blind to see. 2 days later, December 22nd, I got a text from my old friend Tom, who lived in Ethan's neighborhood. He'd heard about the flood through the grapevine and wanted to check in. "Heard Ethan's house got hit bad. Rumor is they've been struggling for a while. Laura's been spending like they're millionaires, and Ethan's job isn't as secure as he lets on." I frowned at my phone. Struggling? Ethan had never mentioned money troubles beyond the usual complaints. I called Tom for details, and what he told me made my stomach turn. Apparently, Laura had been racking up credit card debt, designer clothes, spa weekends, even a new SUV they couldn't afford. Ethan, meanwhile, was facing layoffs at his company, but hadn't told me, probably too proud to admit they were drowning.
That night, I sat in my living room, the Christmas lights blinking silently on my tree. I thought about Laura's parents, who were apparently so important they'd edged me out of the holiday, yet I'd never heard them offer to help Ethan financially. I'd met them a few times, stiff, polished people who always seemed to look past me, like I was a piece of furniture. Laura's dad, Richard, was a retired lawyer who liked to brag about his golf club membership, while her mom, Diane, never missed a chance to mention their heritage home in Portland. Heritage, my foot! It was a McMansion they'd bought with a fat inheritance. And now their daughter's reckless spending was threatening my son's future, and they were nowhere to be found. I prayed again that night, not just for strength, but for clarity. "Lord, show me what's really going on here," I whispered. "If there's a lesson to be learned, let it be clear." The next morning, December 23rd, clarity arrived in the form of a second disaster. Ethan called, his voice shaking. "Dad, the SUV..." It's gone. Stolen right out of our driveway last night. The police say it's probably long gone, and the insurance won't cover it because we missed a payment on the premium." I could hear Laura crying in the background, the kids asking questions. "How does this keep happening?" Ethan said, almost to himself. I didn't have an answer, but a chill ran through me. First the pipes, now the car. It was like the universe was stripping away their safety net, just as they'd stripped away mine. I didn't offer to help this time. Instead, I asked, "Ethan, what's really going on? Tom says you've been struggling for a while. Why didn't you tell me?" There was a long pause, then a confession. "Laura's been spending a lot, Dad, more than we can handle. I thought I could manage it, keep her happy, keep her parents happy, but it's all falling apart." For the first time, I heard the weight of his choices, the pressure he'd been under to maintain a life I'd been unknowingly funding. I felt for him, but I also felt something else. Anger, not just at Laura, but at myself for enabling this for so long. As I hung up, I looked out my window at the snow starting to fall, soft and quiet. Christmas was 2 days away, and my son's world was crumbling faster than I could have imagined. Part of me wanted to rush in, to fix it like always, but that quiet voice was back, stronger now, telling me to hold fast. God wasn't done yet, and neither was I.
Christmas Eve arrived like a thief in the night, blanketed in an unusual layer of fog that rolled in from the Puget Sound, making the drive to Ethan's suburb feel eerie, even from my distant view. I hadn't planned to go anywhere near their house, but curiosity, or maybe that same guiding voice, had me checking the weather app for their area. A severe storm warning popped up, unusual for this time of year. High winds, heavy rain, potential power outages. I texted Ethan a simple, "Stay safe tonight," but got no reply. Instead, around 8 p.m., as I was settling in with a microwave dinner and an old holiday movie, my phone lit up with his call. "Dad, the power's out. The storm knocked down a tree in our yard, and it's blocking the driveway. We can't even get out if we needed to." His words tumbled out, laced with fear. Laura's parents had arrived earlier that day, he said, but now everyone was huddled in the dark, candles flickering, the kids scared. I pictured it all too clearly. The house I'd helped them afford, now battered by winds howling like judgment itself. "What about generators, or calling for help?" I asked. Ethan laughed bitterly. "Generator? We don't have one. And the roads are a mess. Emergency services are swamped." In the background, I heard Laura snapping at him, something about how this was all his fault for not preparing. Then Richard's voice boomed in, calm but authoritative, suggesting they ride it out. Ride it out? Easy for him to say, lounging in the home my money had secured while I'd been deemed unworthy of a seat at the table. I offered a few practical tips from my years dealing with small-town storms. Board up windows if possible, conserve phone batteries, but I stopped short of volunteering to drive through the mess. "You'll get through it, son. Pray. That's what I'm doing." After we hung up, I knelt again, my prayer more fervent this time. "Lord, if this is your way of showing them the fragility of their choices, let it be a wake-up call, not destruction." But as the night wore on, news alerts on my phone painted a grim picture. The storm was worsening, labeled a once-in-a-decade event by meteorologists. Power lines down across Seattle suburbs, flooding in low-lying areas. even reports of minor injuries from falling debris. I couldn't sleep, pacing my living room, wondering if this was coincidence or something divine. By midnight, another call from Ethan confirmed the escalation. "The tree branch pierced the roof, Dad. Rain's pouring in now. We're moving furniture, but the kids' presents are soaked. Everything's a disaster." His voice broke, and for the first time in years, he sounded like the boy I'd raised, vulnerable and in need.
That's when the confessions poured out, unbidden, like the rain outside their windows. Ethan admitted that Laura had been pushing for a bigger, flashier life to impress her parents. Renovations they couldn't afford, vacations on credit, all while he'd buried his head in the sand about his job instability. "Her folks always act like we're not good enough unless we match their standards," he said. "I didn't want to disappoint them or her, but Dad, I've disappointed you instead." I listened, my heart aching, but also stirring with a strange vindication. All those years of my quiet support brushed aside for appearances, and now nature itself, or God through it, was tearing down the facade. By dawn on Christmas morning, the storm had passed, but the damage lingered. Ethan's next update came via text. Photos of the fallen tree, a gaping hole in the roof, water stains creeping down walls. Insurance would cover some, but not all. Not the deductibles, not the lost holiday cheer. Laura's parents, he said, were already talking about cutting their visit short, heading back to Portland, where their own home was unscathed. No offers of help from them, just complaints about the inconvenience. I stared at those images, feeling a mix of sorrow and awe. 3 disasters in as many days. The burst pipes, the stolen SUV, now this storm. Each one stripping away a layer of their self-sufficiency, exposing the rot beneath. Was this God's strike? It felt too precise, too timed to my exclusion and my prayers. I decided then to drive up, not to rescue, but to witness. The roads were clear by afternoon, the sun breaking through as if to mock the chaos. When I arrived unannounced, the scene was heartbreaking. The grandkids playing with soggy toys in the yard, Ethan hammering plywood over the roof hole, Laura inside packing up decorations with a defeated slump. Richard and Diane were on the porch, sipping coffee from thermoses, looking inconvenienced rather than concerned. Ethan spotted me first, his face a storm of relief and shame. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I held up a bag of sandwiches and tools from my truck. "Thought you could use a hand. Merry Christmas." As I helped clear debris, the conversations turned raw. Laura, red-eyed, admitted her spending had spiraled out of control, fueled by pressure to keep up with her parents' expectations. "I didn't realize how much we relied on you, Dad," she said quietly, while we mopped up water. Richard overheard and bristled, defending their influence as motivational. But even he seemed subdued, perhaps realizing their pedestal was cracking. That evening, as we sat around a battery-powered lantern sharing a makeshift meal, Ethan pulled me aside. "This feels like punishment, Dad, for pushing you away." I shook my head. "Not punishment, son, a reckoning. Sometimes God lets the storms come to show us what's truly important."
The day after Christmas, with the sun casting a pale light over the debris-strewn yard, I found myself knee-deep in cleanup alongside Ethan. We'd patched the roof temporarily with tarps and nails, but the real work was in salvaging what we could from the flooded interiors. Laura had taken the kids to a neighbor's for warmth and distraction, leaving us men, me, Ethan, and Richard, to tackle the mess.
Diane hovered nearby, offering unhelpful commentary about how proper maintenance could have prevented this, her tone implying it was all Ethan's fault. Richard, ever the lawyer, was on his phone most of the time, barking at insurance agents about claims and timelines. I watched him closely, noting how he avoided any physical labor, preferring to dictate rather than do. As we hauled soaked carpets to the curb, Ethan opened up more, his words spilling out between grunts of effort. "Dad, I should have listened to you about insulating those pipes. And the car. Laura insisted on that fancy SUV to match her mom's, but we could have stuck with something practical." I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow despite the chill. "Choices have consequences, son. But why hide the money troubles? I could have helped earlier, before it got this bad." He paused, setting down a box of ruined ornaments. Pride, I guess. And Laura, she didn't want her parents knowing we were struggling. They think we're doing great, like them. But truthfully, we've been maxing out cards for months. Richard overheard the tail end and interjected from the porch. "Struggling? Ethan, if you'd managed better, none of this would have happened. We raised Laura to expect stability." His words hung heavy, laced with blame. That's when something snapped in me. Not anger, but a clear-eyed resolve. I turned to Richard, my voice steady. "Stability? I've been providing that for years, Richard. The down payment on this house? My savings. The kids' school fees? My checks. While you've been expecting things, I've been delivering." He blinked, caught off guard, his phone lowering. Diane stepped forward, her face flushing. "Now wait a minute. We've helped too, in ways you wouldn't understand." Ethan shot her a look. "Helped? You mean criticizing every decision we make? Or pressuring Laura to spend on appearances?" The air thickened with unspoken truths, the storm's aftermath revealing more than just water damage.
By evening, as we gathered in the half-lit living room, power still spotty from downed lines, the conversation turned to the heart of it all. Laura, back with the kids, confessed tearfully about her shopping addiction, how it started small but grew to fill the void of her parents' constant comparisons. "Mom and Dad always talked about their perfect life, and I wanted that for us, but it was fake, all on credit." Diane defended herself weakly. "We just wanted the best for you." But Richard stayed silent, perhaps for the first time realizing his role in the pressure cooker they'd created. I shared my side then, quietly recounting the hurt of being uninvited to Christmas, how it felt like being cast aside after years of support. "I prayed for understanding," I said, "and instead got this, a mirror showing everyone's flaws, including mine, for enabling too long." That night, as I drove home under a starlit sky, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Thanks for coming, Dad. We're talking about selling the SUV replacement and downsizing. Real change." I smiled faintly, but the awe lingered. The burst pipes had exposed neglect, the theft stripped luxury, the storm shattered illusions. Each event, perfectly sequenced, felt orchestrated by a higher power responding to my plea for justice. But God wasn't just striking down. He was building up, forcing growth from the rubble. A week later, New Year's Eve brought another twist. Ethan called with news. His job had announced layoffs, but in a surprise move, he'd been spared, promoted even, to a role with better pay but more responsibility. "It's like the universe cleared the deck for this," he said. Laura had started therapy for her spending, and her parents, humbled, offered to help with repair costs for the first time. Not a handout,
but alone, with terms, acknowledging their part in the mess. I visited again that weekend, helping with final fixes, and for the first time, Richard shook my hand firmly. "You've been the rock here, not us. Sorry it took a storm to see it." Diane even apologized, admitting their snobbery had blinded them to my value. As we sat around a repaired table, sharing a simple meal, the grandkids climbing on my lap, I felt peace settle in. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. God's strike had been merciful, destructive enough to wake them, but not to destroy. And in the process, I'd reclaimed my place, not as a wallet, but as family.
Months passed after that chaotic Christmas, and life began to reshape itself in ways I never anticipated. By February, Ethan and Laura had sold the damaged house at a modest profit, enough to pay off debts and buy a smaller, more manageable place closer to his new job. The promotion had come with longer hours, but also stability, and Ethan threw himself into it with a determination I hadn't seen since he was a kid building model rockets in our garage. Laura, meanwhile, had transformed her spending habits through therapy and a part-time job at a local boutique, channeling her energy into budgeting classes she now taught online. Her parents, Richard and Diane, visited less frequently, but when they did, the dynamic had shifted. No more subtle digs or expectations of grandeur. Instead, conversations turned to gratitude, with Richard even asking for my advice on home repairs, admitting he'd never been handy. One crisp March afternoon, Ethan invited me over to their new home for the first time. It was a modest ranch-style house, nothing flashy, but warm and lived in, with the kids' artwork plastered on the fridge and a backyard big enough for a swing set I'd helped assemble. As we grilled burgers on the patio, Ethan pulled out a folder from his back. "Dad, I want to show you something." Inside were bank statements and a repayment plan, detailing how they'd set aside a portion of his salary each month to pay me back for the years of support. It's not much at first, but we'll get there. $200 a month until it's square. I flipped through the pages, my throat tightening. "Son, you don't have to—" He cut me off gently. "Yes, I do. This is about making things right. God's strike showed us we were living on borrowed grace, literally." That word, grace, stuck with me. Looking back, the events of December weren't random calamities, they were divine interventions, each one peeling back layers of pride and pretense. The burst pipes had forced them to confront neglected foundations, much like their marriage and finances. The stolen SUV symbolized the theft of their priorities, chasing material things over family bonds. And the storm? It was the great equalizer, reminding us all that no one is above nature's or God's wrath when lives are built on shaky ground. In my quiet moments, I'd reflect on my initial prayer for justice, realizing it had been answered not with vengeance, but with redemption. I had been hurt, yes, but holding on to that hurt would have poisoned me. Instead, letting go allowed healing to flow.
By spring, our family gatherings became regular. Easter at my place, where the grandkids hunted eggs in my yard, laughing as they found treats I'd hidden with care. Laura's parents joined, and for the first time, Diane shared stories from her own humble beginnings, admitting she'd forgotten her roots in the pursuit of status. "We pushed too hard," she confessed over coffee.
Seeing everything fall apart made us see you clearly, the steady one holding it all." Richard nodded, adding, "If those disasters hadn't hit when they did, we might have kept on blindly." I smiled, not needing to say much. The proof was in the changed hearts around the table. As summer approached, Ethan surprised me with tickets to a baseball game, just the two of us, like old times. On the drive there, he opened up about the deeper lessons. "Dad, I think God used those strikes to save us from ourselves. Without them, we'd have kept excluding what mattered. You, real connection, for superficial stuff." I agreed, sharing how my solitude that Christmas had strengthened my faith, turning pain into purpose. "Sometimes being left out is God's way of pulling you in closer to Him," I said. We watched the game under a clear sky, cheering as our team won, the bond between us stronger than ever. Now, looking ahead to next Christmas, plans are already in motion. A big family affair at their new home, with me at the head of the table. No exclusions, no pretenses, just gratitude for the strikes that brought us here. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that divine justice isn't always thunderbolts. Sometimes it's a series of whispers that build to a roar, reshaping lives for the better.
Looking back on that fateful Christmas, it's clear now that what I perceived as personal rejection was the catalyst for profound change. Not just for Ethan and his family, but for me as well. The sequence of events, from the unexpected exclusion to the cascading disasters, wove a tapestry of divine intervention that reshaped our relationships and priorities. God's strikes weren't arbitrary punishments, they were precise instruments of mercy, dismantling the barriers of pride, materialism, and ingratitude that had quietly eroded our family bonds. The burst pipes revealed neglected foundations, both literal and metaphorical, forcing Ethan to acknowledge the maintenance required in marriage and finances. The stolen SUV stripped away the veneer of luxury, highlighting how chasing status had robbed them of true security. And the ferocious storm on Christmas Eve served as the ultimate reckoning, humbling everyone under the same vulnerable roof, reminding us that no amount of wealth or social standing can shield us from life's tempests. In the year that followed, the transformations deepened. By August, Ethan had not only stabilized his career, but mentored younger colleagues, passing on the lessons of resilience he'd learned the hard way. Laura's budgeting classes grew into a small online community where she shared her story openly, helping others escape the cycle of overspending. The grandkids, resilient as ever, thrived in their simpler home, cherishing experiences over excess, family hikes, board game nights, and visits to Grandpa's house, where I'd teach them woodworking in my garage. Richard and Diane, once distant figures of judgment, became more involved in meaningful ways. Richard volunteered legal advice for low-income families, inspired by my blue-collar roots, while Diane started a book club focused on stories of humility and grace. For me, the journey culminated in a renewed sense of purpose. At 66, I joined a church group for widowers, sharing my testimony of how prayer turned exclusion into embrace. God doesn't always answer with comfort, but with clarity that leads to stronger foundations. That Christmas exclusion, painful as it was, gifted me the freedom to redefine family, not by blood or obligation, but by mutual respect and love. And in a surprising twist, it even sparked a small side venture. I began writing a blog about faith through family trials, drawing readers who resonated with the idea that divine strikes can be blessings in disguise. If there is a takeaway from all this, it's that life's storms often arrive uninvited, but they carry the potential for renewal if we're open to the lessons. Have you ever felt God's hand in your hardships, turning what seemed like disaster into deliverance? Think about it. Perhaps your own uninvited Christmas moment is waiting to unfold into something greater. Share your stories in the comments below, and if this tale of justice and redemption moved you, like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more inspiring narratives. Until next time, remember, when God strikes, it's not to break you, but to rebuild you stronger.